See, it's not very responsive. There we go. All right, we're recording. So yesterday I had a problem with this line. I had a typo. This should be /recipe/ID, which is the show action. That takes you to the show action. That's the detail of one particular item. So the last piece we didn't cover yesterday was the edit and the update in the scaffolding that was created for us. So let's look at those two methods. The edit is what happens when I first try to go edit an existing record in the database. So the URL is /recipes/whatever record number I want to edit, and then the word /edit at the end of that. So that route comes to this method. We go to the database and we call and we say, find me that particular record. Find me record number 1. And stuff it into this variable. So what is recipe now? What is @recipe?
It's a recipe object.
It's a recipe object, right? And it's an instance variable, so that means it's available in my view. So if I go to the view for this, the edit is going and rendering the same form that the new method had. So new goes to create, edit goes to update. Those two tie together. So we're going to look at the form. The form we looked at yesterday, it's identical. It's a partial in my recipes. And all it does is lay out all the fields. But because this already has data in it, this form for recipe, this method changes slightly, and it actually fills in the value that was in the database. Because it's always easier to have the data, have it be sticky, right? I want to be able to see what was in there before so that I can make a minor change and update the data. So when they come down here and they hit submit, that submit also changes. So, oh, I don't have my thing running. Let's run my server. Get my server running. So when they hit submit, it comes back and posts to the, if I look here, to the update side, which is doing a put method, which also is not available in one of the HTTP verbs. So it uses that separate data method that I talked about yesterday. And we have, we're basically doing a post to the recipe/ID, which calls the update method. So the update method in my controller is slightly different. It's using that put, that false put, and it goes and finds the data again from the parameters this time instead of from the database. So it takes that and updates the parameters that were passed to the form, or from the form into the Rails application, and it takes those and calls this method called update attributes. So params has only the data that's been modified. Param subrecipe has only the data for that whole record. And if this comes back true, then it says, okay, that was fine. It saves it in the database, and there were no validation errors here. So it saves it in the database, and we redirect back to the recipe itself to look at the show page. We're basically looking at the detail page again of that one record. If it fails, that means there was some error in the data or some problem with the database, and it comes back and it says, oh, that's a problem. I'm going to take you back to the edit page, and that edit page then lists all the errors, the validation errors on the same page, and it will stay there in that loop until the save actually happens here. All right, so that's a quick overview of all of the 7 methods corresponding to the CRUD and the RESTful. This is called RESTful routes.
Just kind of a minor question.
Mm-hmm.
Where was it that it shows where the button on the bottom will update or create a new? The text on that button is different, and they're loading the same form.
Yeah, that's in this magic here of the form for. If it has data in this recipe, That means it found data it actually retrieved an old record. Then it's going to change this fSubmit. This is actually a function, and it changes that because it knows that you're editing data as opposed to, if this is all nil, if all of these are nil in here, that means it was a new product, and it says create instead. So it's some of that Rails magic inside of this form for method here.
I wasn't seeing somewhere
In the Rails code itself, yeah.
Okay, yeah, because I was like, I'm just not seeing.
Yeah.
Choosing what to display there.
Right. And you can override this, of course. You can change these names, but then you'd have to have two partials, one for new, one for edit, things, or pass variables. It's more complicated. Right.
Just out of curiosity.
Good question. All right, so I think we've covered that pretty well. Any question on the whole REST CRUD scaffolding that is created here? All right. So our next assignment is to create a bunch of data in our records, a bunch of records in our database, and to then apply pagination to those. So the first thing we want to do, remember that when I was in the console, how did I create a record in the console? Okay, so I can say I could say something like a equals recipe dot create, and then I pass it all of the variables that I want. Like the name of my recipe might have something like Dave special, and finally loaded. I could pass all of the variables that I need to create that record, right? And when I do that, it actually creates the record and saves it to the database, except that I have some errors in here, so it didn't actually save it. I didn't have, some of my validations didn't pass, right? Okay, so that same line is just a line of Ruby code. So I need some way of executing some Ruby code in a nice fashion. All right, Rails gives us a couple of ways to do that, and I'm going to show you two. Probably only get to one today. It's in a file called seeds.rb. All right, so if you look in your DB folder, there's a file that was created for you when we first created the Rails app called seeds.rb. And this is a way to create records in the database with some default values. Now, the problem is this kind of has a little bit of a religious war about it as well. This ideally was designed to create stuff in your database that is going to stay there, that's constant. You're not going to edit that data. But it's going to be available like zip codes or all the state names or things like that. So you can create those like this, like they're saying here, doing just Ruby code and creating data that's going to stick around. But I like to use it because it's easy to create a bunch of test data as well. So it's just a program that we're going to run with a different fashion. So I could just say puts hello Dave, and that when I run this now, I'm running it through a separate special command in the rake style. So it's a rake task. So I'm going to run a rake task, and it's called db:/seeds or seed. So it says load the seed data from db/seeds.rb. So when I run this, I can pass arguments if I want, the environment that I'm in, etc. And it's going to go out and actually execute this Ruby code. This is just straight Ruby code. But the difference is that this Ruby code has access to all of the Rails environment. So just like I did in the console, while that's running, it takes a little bit to run because it has to load all the development environment into memory and then execute this one line. So I could do something like recipe.create, and then pass in all the data that I need for my recipe. So let's see, it finally finished. It said, "Hello, Dave." So it's just straight Ruby code here. Let me get my schema here and copy this so that I can create my recipe better, easier. All right, so first of all, I need my name. And I'm going to say that is something like Dave, I don't know, best burgers. And then I'm going to put these on different lines just because you'll see in a minute, make it a little easier. I'm going to have my serves is a number. Now, so I'm going to put 8. Then I'm going to have cost is a decimal, so it's going to cost me $9.99. And then we have made by, thank you, is going to be Dave. That's why I have a problem. There you go. Thank you. Then we need ingredients, or last made. And that's a date. So for now, I'm just going to do time.now. And ingredients is going to be beef, right? Beef, bread, cheese, all right? And, oh, got to have bacon, yes. Yes?
Can you have to use the symbol, or can you use the other way of defining this, where you do the colon on the other side?
You can use the new hash statement. If you'd like the new one, better use that one. Then we have the image, which is a URL, right? It's going to be a string going to, I don't know, beef or burger dot PNG. All right, so that will create one recipe in my database. So let's delete this. The created by, or created at, and updated at are going to be created automatically for me. The ID is going to be created automatically for me. So when I run this, notice I don't have a Dave's burger here. If I run this using the DB seed again, it's going to run this and execute it just like it was in the console and create the data in the database. All right? Now, one thing you have to be careful of is that the data you put in here has to validate, because you've already by now put validations in your product. So if you miss something here, the create is going to fail, and it's not going to put the data in the database. So you have to make sure that all of your fields are validating correctly, that you're putting valid data in there.
Do you see an error if it doesn't validate? If it doesn't create?
No. No. So it said, "Hello, Dave," and it printed out nothing else, because that create, I didn't tell it to print anything, right? So if I reload my recipes now, there we go. I've got my best burgers here. Isn't that great? So it created a single record in my database. Any questions on that? Don't make an infinite loop. You'll have a big problem. So obviously, if I'm going to create more than one, what would I do? Put a loop around this. Okay, so I could say, and I'll do this, let's see, 5.times do, and end, and let's assign this a variable, so because you guys wanted to see something print, and let's puts out the inspection of the A variable, which is what type of variable? It's a recipe object. Very good. Got to indent correctly. Good. So let's run it again. And this should create 5 best burgers records that are identical. Now, identical data in a database is not really good, right? We don't really like to do that. They have a different time dot now is all. So obviously this is not good test data. So we have another way of doing this while this is running. Let's open up my command prompt here while that's running and go into IRB. This is old IRB stuff. There was a gem. Let's see. First of all, there's a gem called Faker, and I'm going to use that gem. So I need to install that gem. Install Faker. I think mine already has it on here, but that's what we have to do to get the gem installed. And you can look up online what the gem does, but I'll go through a quick overview of it. It's a way of generating fake data in a really nice way, I think. So that's going to go install the gem. Okay, here we go. So here's the 5 recipes that it created. I've got all of these here. Now notice that this has a nil here. Why? If I go and reload my database from the browser, I don't see any more records created. Why?
Because the name already matches.
Right, because in my model, I have a uniqueness of, meaning my recipes have to have a unique name. So that's why this doesn't really work very well. If I were just to run it again, it would do the same thing. It would just fail. So that lets me know that that record didn't fail. That's the error that you were trying to get at. So it did everything else except actually create the record. All right? So that's not going to work very well. So here my gem is installed, my Faker gem. We need different data for every record that we create, in my case. So I'm going to go into IRB and show you we can require Faker. And inside of here, there are a bunch of methods that I can run, like Faker company.bs, which stands for exactly what you think it stands for. And it comes out with a couple of verbs and nouns, and it says engage out-of-the-box communities. This is one of those BS terms that corporations actually use. And there are BS generators all over the internet. I have one on my iPhone. But the sad thing is that in a lot of corporations' mission statements, they have these type of just garbage things. I mean, they just don't really mean anything. But if I run that, every time I run that, notice I'm getting a different BS here. All right, and they recontextualize in. See, these are great. I can also look at names. I can generate a name that looks like a real name, right? Carol Ann Eltonworth IV, Verlie Gaylord, Natalia Becker. So these are all random names, right? This is good. I can generate. I can generate internet addresses, email addresses, concepcion@afferts.biz. And these are valid, validatable email addresses. No, it doesn't do burger, but it has a bunch of these. You can find it online. I guess we could search for it and show it to you. It's Ruby, Faker, Gem, Faker 0.31, and here's the documentation. So I have an address. I can generate an address with all of these things: city, state, zip, country, postal code. I can generate company stuff like BS or a catchphrase, which actually end up being the same thing. Name, a company name. So let's do a company name. Faker company.name. And it says the Bailey Group, the Sporer Group, LLC. So these are all valid kind of company-looking names. All right, isn't that cool? I love this gem. That's very cool. I can generate some lorem ipsum. So if I have a big, long thing of like ingredients, I could generate a couple of paragraphs of lorem ipsum automatically. So let's do a single paragraph of lorem. And so it's called faker text.lorem. No, that did it wrong. Let's see. It's faker lorem and then paragraph. Lorem.paragraph. And so it gives me lorem ipsum, which you guys all know about, and that fills up Word-like looking, English-like looking text in a text box for me, for instance. So all my ingredients, I might use that, a couple paragraphs of lorem ipsum. It generates phone numbers, all kinds of different styles of phone numbers, so that you can check your validator of phone numbers. That's also a way to check that. All right, so let's use some of these information. So in Rails, how do I get a new gem into my Rails system here? Anybody remember? No, we're gonna modify our gem file. We haven't looked at this in a while. This is the gem file that tracks all of the gems that this project is using. All right. So while we're here, some of you, I made a note that I wanted you to upgrade your Rails project. To do that, the easiest way is to change the version of Rails that you want to use in your gem file. So some of you are using 3.2.2, for instance. So all we have to do is change it to 3.2.8, and then re-execute the bundle command, and it will install that gem for me and use my Rails stuff for me. So that's how we upgrade our Rails version. So all I have to do is call the gem function and give it the name of the gem that I want to install, and gem faker is what I'm going to use. And so then all I have to do is run the bundle command, bundle install, and it's going to go through and find the gem, and everything, I already had it installed, so all it says is using it's in here somewhere. Yeah. Yeah, it's already installed. If you didn't have it installed, it would say installing faker. So that's a way of making sure that all your data is all your gems are being utilized here. So that's the first thing I have to do is install the gem, make that available to my seeds file. To do it in my seeds file, I have to use the require statement or the include statement. And it's easier if I use the include and the faker without a string, because then I don't have to do things like faker : : which is what? Remember what this is?
It's
A namespace. It's a module which defines a namespace. I don't have to do this. I can just do company.bs. So it saves some typing if I include the whole module in this file. So we're going to take that out. And now, instead of this recipe.create, I'm going to create a name. And this already returns a string, so I'm going to say, I don't know what BS do I want to use? Company.name. How about that? Now notice that since I said include and the gem file is in there, RubyMine picks this up and knows that there's a name method of the company class. The company class, and this is a method. So I can call the company name. Serves. Now if I want this to be a random number, how could I change this instead of, because I want different data for all of my records? Rand, right? Rand of what? Maybe 2 to 12. All right? So it's going to serve between 2 and 12 people. All right? How about a cost? I could do a rand also. So let's play with what rand would be like in IRB. if I just did a random number, I'm going to get a decimal point number, and I might multiply that by something to get a price. All right, let's multiply it by 4. All right, so then I'm going to get a number between 0 and 4, right? Remember that random stuff we did? Oh, yeah, to get a whole number, but I have a decimal number. So I want to have only 2 decimal places. So I'm going to multiply times 10. Going to take that value, multiply times 10. Nope, I'm going to multiply by 100. And then divide by 10. Let's see what I get. And then nope. Dot 2i. We're going to take that value and divide by 10. Divide by 10.0. There we go. So now I'm going to get a number that has some decimal point value and some whole value. All right, so you can play around with this value. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to copy this out, put it in my value here. So now every time this gets generated, I'm going to get a different price. Made by, again, this could be a different name. Actually, I'm going to make this BS and make this name. Last made. I was. Isn't that what I typed? All right, time, we'll just leave time now for here. Ingredients, let's use lorem for that. So it's lorem dot paragraphs and some number of paragraphs. Let's make a random number of 1 to 4 paragraphs. All right. Then an image, we'll leave that there for now. That's not required. We'll do that in a second because I actually want to have images, right? I want to actually see some images. So let's run my seed again. Any questions on what we just did? Yes?
Our products, as far as names go, can we just use name dot or for Baker, use something like name?
Yeah, anything. I don't care what it looks like. No. No. Nope. And again, this is, so there we go. Look at that. I got recipe IDs here now, so it actually saved them. And my name is Revolutionized Strategic Infomediaries. That's the name of my recipe. I mean, I don't know, mesh B2B eyeballs. That's pretty funny. All right, so now when I go back and look at my data in my browser, reload all of these, I've got all kinds of good stuff. Now, notice that now that I have real data in here, how my columns kind of blow out. That's why I put real data in here, because you can't tell what a user is going to put in. And so we put in all kinds of different random values to try to, because when I only put pork and barbecue sauce, it fit. It's nice. This doesn't look so good, does it? No. So we need to modify our views a little bit, and we'll talk about that, how to do some of that later, so that we only show a portion of this, perhaps. All right, so now I have, this one was made by Erdman Johns. I've got a different time. I've got 10, $2.30, $4.10, etc. Yes?
For our images, how do you want us to handle that?
Okay, we'll do that right now. Any other question?
Could you just go overflow hidden on that?
You could. Yes. But there's a Rails method called Truncate, if you want to play with that, that will actually, in your display only, cut it down to a certain number of words. All right, so let's look at how I might have a bunch of images. Now, I said I really want real images here, right? So, but I can't just randomly put titles because I don't have images for those. But let's say if I created, how might I have 5 different images? There you go. So if I have images equals an array of burger.ping followed by, what are some that I actually have here? Okay, I've got apple pie. I've got apple pie. .jpg. I've got apples. Apples.jpg. I've got baby back ribs.jpg. I've got Rails. Let's put the Rails in there. Rails.ping. All right, so here is a list, an array of all of the images that I might have available. Now, how might I use that array to choose one of those randomly here? How many are in there? So I don't know, so how can I use Rails to tell me? All right, images.length. There you go. All right, so now every time I run this, I'll get a different images here. Now, I have it set to 5. I could up this to 100, right? I do it in small increments until I see that everything's working right. Because every time I add them, notice how my data is still here. I mean, I'm just adding on to whatever I had before. So let's run this one now. And that's going to go for a little bit. Any questions so far? Yep. I will. No questions? All right, so here we go. Enable vertical functionalities. That's a good recipe. And then some of my image is way at the end here. Babybackribs.jpg. All right. So now if I look at my page, reload it, I've got even more. Let's go all the way to the bottom because I should have some valid images. This one says apple pie, so that has a valid image. If I show my page, it shows my apple pie on there. So I'm starting to be able to see what looks like real data, right? This ingredients here, for instance, while it's not readable, it's Latin, it looks like English, and it fills out my ingredients nicely. So I can see, is it formatted right? Do I have it padding correctly? Things like that. All right. You had a question, Doug? Oh, all right. All right, one last thing. Tomorrow, I think we've covered, we'll do that in a second. I think we've covered enough now that you can create 100 records. One thing, if you want to start over, before you run this, I could say recipe.delete all. That basically drops my entire table. That deletes every record in my database so that I start out fresh with just the data that I'm randomly created. Now, some of you have spent time putting in real data in here. I don't suggest you do that. But if I run this now, I should only have 5 of them, and all my Dave's ribs and all that will be gone. So I'll run that.
Can't you do a recipes
Oh, sure. Yep.
And so if you know the 5,
If you know what they are. But the problem is that every time I create these now, this record number is 16. If I delete them all, my next record number is going to be 17. I don't get to reuse my record numbers. Those are the unique IDs in the database, just like in SQL.
Yeah, but you just got to find out what the
Yeah,
lowest and highest one is in your database, so it shouldn't be that hard to find.
right.
And then run a delete based off of those.
All right, so it created 17. It deleted all my others. I've got 17. If I reload my page now, well, that one's gone. 16 is gone. Go back to my recipes. Now I've got all of these, and if you look, my recipe, first one starts at 17. So if I look at that one, it shows my burger image, which I didn't actually have an image for that guy. There's my apple pie.
Surely there must be some way of resetting the number without deleting the entire database.
But who cares? This is my development database.
Yeah.
I don't care. This is all test data. I'm going to trash this 1,000 times. I don't care at all.
Okay.
So obviously you would not run this in production. All right, and we'll talk about that tomorrow. So the question was, how can I change what shows? There's a method. This is my recipes index page that loops through and shows all of my table. So the ingredients is the bad one. This is really long. And there's a method called Truncate. If I look at the API for Ruby on Rails and look up Truncate, it lets me truncate data to some number. I can tell it I only want 17 words, for instance. And at the end, it'll put ... an ellipsis, so that I can show there's actually more data there. So let me add that real fast to my truncate. All right, reload my page. And bada boom, bada bing, I have less data here. See the little ... dots? Isn't that sweet? It's cool stuff, man. I'm telling you. Yes, in the API, you just say how many words I want, the length. I can tell it more. I can separate it based on periods or commas. I can change the omission. Instead of just ... it's going to say ... continued at the end. So there's a lot of options for that. All right, isn't that cool? All right, that's enough for today.